What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Travis. Of course, this is TWA Motorsports, and today we are back on the Trans Am project, continuing the cleanup and fixes. And like I told you guys in the last video, when we did several things interior related, some buffing on the mirrors and put a couple new parts on, cleaned all the door jambs out, I am going to start on the suspension in today's video. So I really think that this will probably be a couple videos, like I said, because in the last video, because of the amount of stuff that we're going to do. But I'm wanting to lower this thing, and I figured it's a good time to do it while we have, well, I'm waiting on some other stuff for the interior. And so I'm wanting to lower it. I'm also wanting to upgrade the brakes and get rid of those ugly looking calipers. So we're gonna try to paint those as well. But my plan is to maybe do the front in this video and the rear in the next video because I'm also waiting on a few other parts. But let's talk about what we're going to be using, because I have a few parts over here and I will list all this stuff in the description down below. But I've got, you can see a strut brace, a strut tower brace. I know it's kind of controversial whether you need those or not. Look, on a convertible, I don't think it hurts. And so I ordered one of those, and there's several different companies out there. You don't have to spend a gob of money on these guys. I think it just stiffens up the front, especially since we don't have a top on this car. I also got some used shocks and springs from a buddy of mine. These came off a 30,000 mile car. I don't know whether we're going to use these or not, but they're here. What I am going to be doing is I am going to be cutting the stock springs. Now, before everybody freaks out, goes to the comments and tells me that's a terrible idea, I did it on the red Trans Am here. And guys, I have had every lowering spring imaginable on an Fbody. I've had probably over 100 Fbodies over the years. I've had BMR, I've had Eibach, I've had the Sportline Eibachs, the Pro Kit Eibachs, I've had QA1s. This car has a Viking adjustable coilover on the front of it now. I've had them all, and I can tell you without a doubt, a cut spring rides exactly the same. I've never had any issues with the way they ride. It's cheap. Now look, lowering springs are cheap as well, but in my opinion for this car, I'm just gonna be cutting the springs. So I'm gonna show you that process, but what we need to do first is we need to get this thing off the ground. There is another part that I'm gonna be installing on the front too, which you guys will see later in the video. But we need to get this thing off the ground. We need to get this, obviously the wheels and tires off. I think that'll be the next spot that I show you guys. We need to get the old struts and springs out of place. So let's get this thing off the ground, and I will just cut to the point where we have it off the ground and the wheels off. Now, once we have, obviously it up in the air, the wheel off, I'm gonna start by taking the brakes off. We're gonna be painting the calipers, cleaning them up, and we're gonna be replacing the rotors and the pads, obviously. So these rotors are pretty chewed up. I don't know how much life's left on the pad, and they look terrible. So we wanna upgrade that while we're doing all this. But either way, we need to take a 12 millimeter, because I'm gonna take this apart separately. We're gonna take a 12 millimeter and loosen up the guide bolts, and then an 18 to take the bracket off itself. So I'm gonna go ahead and get those out of the way. And guys, I'm gonna be doing both sides at the same time. So I'm not gonna show you both sides, but let's get this out of the way. And I'm actually gonna let this hang. Normally I would set the brake on something, but I'm gonna be replacing the brake lines as well. So since we're doing all that, it's not gonna hurt to just let it hang by the brake line. I'm actually probably gonna clamp that off to maybe keep some of the fluid from running out when I take it loose. But let's go ahead and whip this off. You can see that we've got the brake caliper hanging back there, got the brake bracket off, and now we can go ahead and pull this guy off. Sometimes they're pretty crusty, but we need to go over and do the other side real quick. And then once we get the other side done, we're gonna go ahead and loosen the sway bar, which I'll bring you over here and show you in just a second. Now that we got that other side loose, we need to take the sway bar loose. And so it's a 13 on the top and the bottom. Now normally, guys, you would want to spray this with some penetrating oil, but mine I'm going to replace while we've got this all apart. And so I'm going to put a 13 on the top and go ahead and whip this thing out. Chances are it'll probably break. They generally do if they've got some age on them, and these look like they do. So don't worry about that. You can get a replacement. I'll list it in the description down below. But yeah, get a 13. I'm gonna use my impact. Like I said, I'll probably snap it, but that's fine. Remember how I said it would break? Check it out, broke. So anyway, on to the strut. I'm gonna go ahead and take these off. It should be a 13 on the bolt head from the bottom and a 15 on the nut here on the top. So you're gonna need two different sizes. I'm gonna go ahead and knock both those out. So you should have two, one on this side and one on the back side there. get them out of the way, and then we will probably move on to removing part of the spindle, but I'm not going to take the spindle completely off the lower ball joint. Now I went ahead and decided I think I'm going to take this off, the spindle here, and the main reason is I want to clean it up and I want to put some paint on it to make it look a little nicer. So what we're going to do is I've already taken the cotter key out of this, the little safety pin. You can see it up here in the top. We need to take those out. So 17 millimeter here. So take the little pin out. I like to use a pair of like side cutters to grab those and kind of pull them out. And then, so the 17 millimeter there, it's 21 millimeter for the lower ball joint, and then it's 15 for the upper. Now you should be able to loosen these by hand. Shouldn't need an impact for those, especially the top one here. You may need to put a breakover bar on the 21 down here, but once we get all those bolts loose, there is no real pressure on this, guys, so you don't have to worry about it like flinging out or doing anything crazy, because the strut is it contains the spring, and we're already loose here. See? So I'm going to take these out. I'm going to hit it with a hammer basically in this section here, kind of up here in the top, right here on the side, and then once you get both those two loose, you can kind of get to the back side of this and hit this one. So the other thing is we do need to unplug our ABS module here, or ABS sensor, which should just be a clip on the top and the bottom. Try not to break it, and get it out of the way anyway. We got it unplugged. So let's get this spindle out of the way. That'll just give me more access to the cleaning that I want to do. Now you can see we've got everything apart. Well, almost everything. I need to undo my clips here. It looks like one of my clips is actually busted. But I need to undo the clips. I want to push that wire loom back as far as I can, because I'm going to clean up this A-arm really well. Ball joints, guys. I don't know, back in the day, I think GM just used better quality stuff, because these ball joints are solid. Both top and bottom are in great shape. So the only other thing I want to disassemble here, like I said, other than that wire, is I do want to take the brake line off. But what I think I will do is I'm going to take, I believe that's a 12 millimeter. We'll pop the line off at the actual caliper. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a pair of vice grips and see if I can clamp down really tight on that, so it kind of, you know, keeps it from leaking as much. It's still going to leak while we're doing what we're doing, but maybe that'll help a little bit. But the next step is we need to go to the top and get the actual rest of the strut loose, because obviously all the bottom's loose. We need to go up top, and I'll show you what you need to do. It's a little more cumbersome on the driver's side, but not bad. So now up to the top here, we obviously need to take out these two, I believe they're 13s right here. And then we have a Torx back behind. The problem is we can't get to the Torx because of the brake master. So we're gonna have to take it off the booster. So you can see the two bolts, there's one right there, and then there's one here on the other side. Those are 15 millimeter. So I'm gonna go ahead and loosen those, and then we need to pull that thing back and kind of move it over in order to get to our Torx. So we got that loose, but before we pull this off, I'm gonna go ahead and take this back one off, which is a T50. And here's what I like to do, guys. I like to take the back ones out first. That way we don't have all the pressure hanging on those while we have this pulled away from the firewall. But either way, I'm gonna go ahead and knock that one out, and then I'll show you guys, you can literally just pull this thing straight out, get it past the studs, kind of move it over while you loosen this one. Now, a trick that a lot of people do, and I will do when I put it back together, is they swap out one of the 13s back there because you can get to it with a wrench without doing this. So why GM chose this, I don't know. I'm sure that it's part of the assembly process. This probably went in before the engine or the body maybe, I don't know. But either way, I will be swapping those, but let's go ahead and get that one out. You can see I've got this thing pulled off. Hopefully you guys can see that. Let me get my light here. See how I have it pulled straight out, and I can move it over just enough to get a long extension down there and get this other guy out. Once you get it out, as you can see, I went ahead and put that back in place. And the reason I did that, guys, you don't want any more pressure on your brake lines than you have to, just for that period of time. So do it quickly and then get it right back into place. You can see I got a little more cleaning to do back there where I couldn't reach under that when I was originally cleaning under hood. But now all we have to do is take these 15s out, and this whole assembly will come out of the bottom. Once that's loose up top, we should be able to kind of wiggle back and forth and bring this thing out of place. check out that buildup. Pretty normal. And this, guys, is supposed to, there's a ton of corrosion there, but this top piece comes off. So we're probably gonna have to tap around on it a little bit with a hammer. Holy, look at, do you see all that? In order to get it out of here. This one right here looks, we may have to let it set with some WD-40 on it for a minute, but I'm gonna grab my vacuum and try to vacuum some of this junk off. I actually got that off the top, but if you look in here, guys, a ton of moisture sets in here. You can see how corroded that thing is. So the ones that I have over there are not this bad. And another common issue is these guys wear out over time. So I am going to be using those struts and those springs. They're just in a little better shape. But if not, you need to spray this with WD-40 and let it set for quite a while. Probably overnight would be best, coming out and spraying it every once in a while. That's gonna give you better odds of getting this apart. A lot of times this spins or breaks because of the moisture that sets in here. But like I said, I'm gonna be replacing it. If you're replacing the whole strut and the spring, it really isn't gonna matter. And you don't have to take it this far apart to do what we've done as far as lowering, but you know how I am, I like to clean stuff, so that's why we're doing what we're doing. But either way, I'm not gonna show you guys the other side because it's actually even easier because we don't have to move the brake master in order to get this guy out. So I'm gonna get this out on the other side, and then we'll talk about what we're gonna be trimming off as far as the spring, and yeah, we'll try to get some stuff apart. Once we get that apart, we need to kind of clean this up. I'm gonna paint this with some POR 15, but what I've got here is just a steel brush. And the cool thing about the POR 15 is obviously we can paint it right over rust. Now, my plan here is to kind of go over this whole thing with this little wire brush and you know, get the big chunky stuff loose and then clean it, like scrub it down with some super clean and then let it set and dry. Look how bad that is. I mean, and once we get that complete, obviously we have a ton of work ahead of us here. And sometimes you need I'm using a flat blade screwdriver because some of this stuff, it would take a minute to get it all knocked down. Big chunks of rust. The piece itself is solid though, but if yours does not seem solid, you know, good luck finding one of these. You can buy the top hats for the struts, but I don't know if you can buy a reman one of these yet. You may be able to. And the main area of concern is this top. Same thing here on the inside where all the water sets. You know, when you're driving down the road, water just sets in this and collects and just, you know, over years it rusts. And especially if this car's been driven in any kind of salt or snow, I don't have any idea on the, because I've seen some that supposedly were low mileage that look like this. So either way, I'm gonna spend some time cleaning this up. I'll kind of show you guys once I'm finished up, kind of what it looks like. It's still gonna look pretty rough, but as far as it'll be ready to put POR 15 on. One of the things I cleaned up really well was this little rubber isolator goes in the top of that upper A-arm. And I think it's a good idea to get those nice and clean. I use my wire brush on it and then just a toothbrush, some super clean. I did use, in order to break some of it up, I used a little bit of brake clean, but I think we're good there. And I'm just gonna set this aside. They do say LH for left-hand side on them, okay? So they are side specific, and so are the A-arms. So just make sure that you don't get them mixed up. I grabbed the other side so you can see what they look like when you pull them out. Isn't that rough? So sometimes I even use a flathead screwdriver to just scrape that extra metal off there and get a good start before I even start brushing it. And if you're careful, you won't tear them or anything. But they do need to be cleaned up. And you guys know, like I said, you know how I am. Nobody will ever even see this. Could you put it back in and not do this? Probably. That's just not how I am. Now that everything's out of the way, I did use my brush and some super clean and go over all this stuff. I'm gonna go over it again with my steam cleaner. I got my steam cleaner warming up right now. I probably won't show you guys that just because, you know, with the steam, you've seen it in the past, you really can't see anything. But I did get those guys cleaned up, so the spindles and the uppers, I got those all clean. I'm pretty sure I've got most of this clean, but I just want to blow some other stuff out. And you can see how terrible these look. So that's one of the reasons I want to put some POR 15 on them. It'll help them from rusting. I'm also probably going to put just a little bit up there where that mating surface is. You can see how it's kind of, you know, scarred up with rust. I wiped it down, but yeah, I'll probably put some up there as well. But I'll try to show you guys ins and outs as I'm going. The other thing is I haven't taken these apart yet. I really want to get everything ready to paint at one time as far as the POR 15 goes. So I am going to take these apart. We're going to cut them. I'm going to clean them up, and then I may put a coat on that too. But I have been letting them set. So you can see the, I keep spraying them with WD-40, let them set for a while. But while the steamer warms up, I'm gonna go ahead and spray this down, scrub on it, and then I'll show you guys once I get it cleaned with the steamer. I don't think it's gonna look much different, but I do wanna get it done so it can be drying, and then we can come back and hit it with some POR 15. I figured while the steam cleaner was warming up, I could go ahead and take these apart. So you can see I've got my Strut compressors on here, and I've got it compressed, you know, a pretty good amount. I like to leave a little pressure on it because it helps push the top off. 15 millimeter is generally what you need to take the top off. We're gonna see if it's gonna come loose. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Check it out. That's why you let it soak in WD-40, guys. So once we do that, should be able to, well, it should come apart. I thought I may have to grab my mallet here. We want to keep that, and we want to keep it in order. I'm going to clean all these pieces up. So the top, the middle, these upper pieces, I'm going to keep them clean, or clean them up. And so what I think I'm going to do at this point is just release the pressure off the spring, and that should go ahead and push the top the rest of the way off. Then we can spend time cleaning this, and then I'll show you where I'm going to be cutting. So you can see we have everything apart now. And the only things that really, you just need to make sure that it all goes back together the same way. So this goes in here, and then the nut on the top. But besides that, we need to pry this apart down here at the bottom, because we have to cut from the bottom. Pretty obvious because the way the spring is tapered. You can see it's tightly wound at the top. Can't cut from there. We have to cut for the bottom. So what I'm planning on doing, guys, on my red Trans Am, I did a hoop and a half. So one whole hoop would be here back to the beginning of this one, and then a half a hoop would be directly on the other side of it. I think on this one though, I'm gonna go one hoop and then a quarter. So basically I'm gonna mark it right in the middle, right here, and then I'm gonna go to the quarter mark. So a hoop and a quarter is what I'm gonna be cutting off of this, and then we will basically clean this spring up. I may touch it up with a little bit of paint, and then we'll get it back together. I'm also gonna clean up, I mean, they're still good, but I'm still gonna clean on them a little bit. But either way, I'm just using a saw or a cutoff wheel on my grinder to cut this. Just make sure you do it quickly, don't get a bunch of heat in the spring, and with it not being compressed, I've never had an issue, but you don't want to, I wouldn't cut it with a torch. I wanted to show you guys what I did here. Okay, so you can see that I've cut off a hoop and a quarter. And to me, the easiest way to do this is cut the hoop off first. So I cut one hoop off, and then I went a quarter. Otherwise, you're trying to cut right here, and you know, my grinder cutoff wheel won't allow me to cut. The wheel's too wide, so you'd end up getting into another part of the spring here. So in my opinion, this is kind of how we did it. I got that other quarter after I did this, so you can kind of see what's going on there. But anyway, we're finished up. I did smooth off the edge really well, and like I said, I'm gonna clean this spring up. I may even paint it. I don't know, it's not in too terrible shape. I'll definitely gonna put something on the end there where it's open metal. But yeah, that's what we've got, guys. And like I said, I've never had any issue with this. The ride quality is just as good as any iBox spring I've ever had. Like I said, I've never had any issues whatsoever. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the other strut apart. I've been cleaning on some parts over here, all the parts that kind of went around this thing. I still got to clean the strut up, but I think I'm gonna like this. So this is what crazy people do when they're neat freaks. They clean all this stuff up and then they paint it. So guys, I might show a little bit of a time lapse here on painting. I'm gonna try to paint each and every piece here with some POR 15. Probably not as much on the springs, maybe just touching up some spots really on that. But these, the uppers, the spindles, and then I'm gonna come over here. I may show you some of this as well. So we're gonna do the bottom A-arm, part of the sway bar, and then just up in that area up here where the spring actually touches. But I wanted to show you guys how crazy I am. I got this makeshift, my cherry picker as a holder. I've got some stuff underneath it so we don't drip. And if we do, it's not an issue. But yeah, wish me luck, guys. It's gonna take me a little bit to get through all this. And I'd like to put 2 coats on it. I'm hoping that once I blow through this, get this side done and the other side done, then maybe we can start back over. I'll have enough time. So either way, like I said, I'll time lapse part of this for you. So after, oh my gosh, probably an hour or two, probably 2 hours of painting, this is where we got both sides accomplished. Obviously we got, and this is just one coat on everything. So I honestly think, guys, I'm gonna leave it with one coat. I think it looks way better. And I'm not going for perfection, just looking more presentable. And I think we've achieved that. I think it'll hold up pretty well. So we'll just have to see in the morning. I'm gonna let it dry overnight and then come out here in the morning. We'll take a look at it again. If it looks good, I think we'll start reassembling the front end. If it doesn't, then we may go over it with one more coat. But I will let you guys know. So let's cut to the next morning. So it's the next morning, everything's dry. And like I said, I think I'm just gonna go with the one coat. I think it looks good, guys. And you know, could you put 2 coats on it? Yeah, but I think we're gonna live with the one. Either way, we're ready to reassemble the struts and the springs up there. So what we're going to do is we're going to use these as guides, the ones that we took off. And the reason why is because you can see this bottom section. That is, sometimes you can spin it once you get it in the car, but a lot of times you can't. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to duplicate the angle of the bottom of this and where the pieces come through the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this one on this piece of cardboard. I'm going to get another piece of cardboard, and we're going to assemble the new ones kind of exactly like these. So you should have a right and a left. And like I said, sometimes in the past I've been able to spin the bottom to line it up, so it didn't really matter how it went back together. But the main things that we want to make sure of are that this bottom pad that the spring sets on is lined up with the end of the spring, and same way with the top. But I'll kind of try to show you that as we go back together. So hopefully you guys can see what we've got going on here. We need to make sure that we put stuff together the same way it came apart. So we're going to put this guy in place, and it should be able to spin so we can get the spring lined up kind of the way we want it. The next thing I'm going to put on is your bump stop is in here, and this little thing to keep water basically out of the top of the strut. And then we need to put our spring on. And the alignment in the bottom of this is what can move back and forth. But you can also see that side by side I've got it set up just like this guy. And so at that point we can push our top piece on, and we should still be able to spin it around, but you can see where this end of the spring lines up there. And so we need to make sure that that goes in place. And sometimes this is a fight to get this in here. I may have to grab my mallet and tap it in. Probably would have been easier to actually do it the other way. Let's take the spring off and see if we can get it where it needs to be up here. This is rubber, and so sometimes it wants to fight you. There we go. You can see the springs lined up. Now let's put it back on. We'll worry about aligning the bottom as we go together. Now, we need to install the strut compressor, and we still don't have this turned where it needs to be. We'll have to move it over like this. Looks pretty good. Pretty close anyway. And actually I've got the wrong side. You can see the rounded end, or hopefully you guys can see that the rounded end on the other one is up. So I need to grab the other strut to compare to actually. Now that I've grabbed the other strut, you can see what I'm talking about. This top plate, we need to make it match. And so I've got these facing the way they need to face. I've got the top facing the way it needs to face. So we need to grab our strut compressors and put them in place and snug them down so we can go ahead and get this thing, get the nut in the washer on the top. Well, it's been a couple days since I've been out here working, but this stuff is all dry. Obviously, we've got the springs and struts reassembled, and I did kind of just spray those with some, I painted obviously with the POR 15 on the springs, but then when you reassemble them, it kind of scuffs them up. So I just shot them with some Rust-Oleum, all assembled, to kind of, you know, make it look a little nicer. But I'm still waiting. You can see I have a huge mess here, but I started cleaning on the brakes a little bit because we are going to be reusing those, and we'll get to that here a little later in this video because I'm still waiting on the pads and the new rotors. But we can go ahead and start reassembling some of this stuff. I'm going to need all those hooks that I've got there kind of strung out on my cherry picker because I'm going to need those for the brakes. But because of that, I'm going to go ahead and start reassembling. Now, it's going to go back together pretty much the same way it came apart. other than we're gonna add a few things up top, which you guys will see as we're going back together. But what I'm going to do is I'm gonna grab basically our top piece that you can see sitting down there on the ground. I'm gonna grab that, we're gonna put it on the strut, and we're gonna see if we can just get it up into place. Now, chances are we're probably gonna scuff some stuff up. You do have to push this A-arm down as we're going, and then I'm gonna loosely thread one of the nuts on the top up here to make sure that it stays in place. But then we'll have all that stuff off my cherry picker, like I said, so we can get to the brakes. But I'll kind of show you in and out here as we're going, so you can kind of see it assembled. So a couple things to note when you're reassembling these. If you've got these moved around, you don't know which side's what. First of all, your studs are gonna come through the front side of the holes, all right? And then there's a little piece of rubber that lines up with this opening. So that should tell you what side's what. So the studs go to the front, obviously the two screws go in the back. Other than that, we need to make sure, obviously we set this back on top of the strut, and then this little rubber piece, it is side specific as well. It says LH for left hand. And so you want to make sure that you get that one on the left, the other one on the right. But aside from that, guys, all we need to do is lift this guy up into place and get it kind of lined up with our holes up top, which sometimes takes some moving back around, back and forth and whatnot. And I just got it in place, and I'm going to twist a couple of these up top. The two little the nuts that go on top. I'm just going to loosely thread those so it kind of stays in place. Now, aside from that, I'm going to grab the two. I'm actually going to clean these off a little bit real quick with a brush, but we need to put these in, and they come up from the bottom. Remember, we took these out that hold the bottom of the strut, and this is where, you know, that alignment that I tried to set up comes into play, because we need to try to, that strut needs to line up. Sometimes you got to tweak it back and forth. If you get it close, generally you can push the bottom A-arm enough down to get these started. So that's my plan here, is hopefully we can do that. One other thing I did was I took my wire brush on my bench grinder and cleaned the bolt up. So for the top, remember this T50 that goes up top, and I'll show you more about that. I'm gonna go ahead and thread it in, but we'll talk more about that. Remember I said we were gonna swap one side or the other. We'll talk about that here in a little bit, but I just wanted to thread one of those in to kind of keep things lined up. But either way, I still gotta do these guys. I'm gonna clean these up a little bit too, make them look a little nicer. I want you to look at how clean my wire brush gets these things. And it's always a good idea to clean the threads out anyway, but man, that looks so much nicer. And they're probably gonna rust and look like crap, and you know, first time this thing gets water on it, but makes me feel better right now anyway. Got one started, I think. Yeah. I may have to thread them in, but we've got them in there anyway. Now that we have the nut on the top, I've just got them loosely threaded on there. We can go ahead and grab our spindle. We're gonna set it in place. I'm gonna use the original bolt or nut that came on it, I mean. And I'm just gonna thread it down lightly. We'll torque it down here in a little bit. And then of course, we need to swing our top one into place. And go ahead and put it on too. And there's one other thing I'm waiting on. I ordered new tie rod ends, mainly because the other side felt a little loose, actually a little stiff to me. But we've got it all together. And I'm gonna go ahead and use my wrench and snug these down. I'm not gonna torque them yet, but I'm gonna go ahead and get them snug. Now that we got everything kind of like snugged up, I do want to go ahead and torque a few things. So I'm going to go ahead and torque the bottom bolts that come through for the strut and the spring. 48 foot-pounds is what those guys torque to. Remember, you got a 13 on the bottom, 15 on the top. So we can go ahead and torque those down. I'm not going to torque the top down until we have weight on the suspension, and obviously we need to install that strut brace. We'll talk about that, and there's another piece as well that I want to install. So we're not going to do that yet, and I really want the suspension loaded to tighten the top ones. Now for the castle nut here on the bottom ball joint, 79 foot-pounds on it. Obviously you may have to swing it a little tighter in order to get your cotter key to line up with that castle nut. And then on the top, 38 foot-pounds on the upper ball joint, and same situation, you may have to swing it a little further in order to get your cotter key lined up. But I'm gonna go ahead and get all those in place. I don't have the tie rod in like I said yet. You will see it in this video. We'll talk about torque specs when I get it. But let's go ahead and get this done on both sides. Now that we have everything torqued, I did get some Energy suspension sway bar end links. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna loosely install those. So you should have a washer, obviously a bolt, a rubber or polyurethane bushing, and then you have your next one, and they are shaped a certain way. You can see that's going to point down. If I can do this without dropping all of it. And then our center sleeve, followed by another washer, another bushing, and then we need to kind of line that up with this guy. And we're not going to tighten this, like I said, until we get some pressure on the suspension. But we can go ahead and at least get it started. And then your top washer, and then the nut that goes on top. Now that we got this thing started, I'm gonna go ahead and put our line that runs into our ABS sensor. I'm gonna go ahead and snap it back into its holders. I'm gonna cut this zip tie that I had holding the brake line out of the way, and I'm gonna put the inner fender liner in, just because we're basically ready to put that in. Until we get our tie rod in, so we really can't do much more down here. So once I get that stuff in, I won't show you guys me installing that, literally just putting them back in. You'll get to see it obviously once we're all finished or go back to the brakes. But then we'll move up top and we'll talk about some of the things that I want to add. Now that we have our inner fender liners put in, there are little rubber pieces that go on the end of the screw on the inside of the fender. So if you guys are wondering what those are, I guess it's just to keep you from messing up your hands. I don't know, but either way, we got this strut tower brace, strut tower. I'm gonna put it on. I think it does stiffen up the front, especially on a convertible. Now, are they more for looks? I don't know, you know, that can be argued. I talked about that earlier, but look, I've got it. We're gonna put it on here. Should just be able to set kind of over this, and I'm gonna kind of equally line it up, and then we'll at least get these started back on here. Now there is another thing that I want to show you guys that I want to put on here. So I'm not going to snug these down yet for a couple reasons. One, we don't have any pressure on the suspension, and that's when I really want to tighten this. But let me go grab the other piece that I got that I think will make a bigger difference than this. I think this will make some difference. It does make it a little more of a pain if you have to pull your intake off, but let's go grab this other piece. The next part I want to show you guys is this guy. And what it does is it's a brace. I'm gonna go grab the other part of it, but this, essentially, when you hit the brake, your firewall flexes. And so Strano came out with this part, which I'll list down below, that keeps your firewall from flexing. So it puts pressure up against the front side of the brake master, and you can apply pressure to it. And so it comes with a couple pieces. Show you this part here. So if you do not have a strut brace, you're gonna need to use this guy, and that spaces it up. So essentially what it does is it's gonna mount here where those two nuts are, and then on the back where our T50 is. And then I don't want to put this in quite yet, and the main reason why, guys, is because I'm gonna have to, I want the suspension loaded before I tighten this down. So I want the weight of the truck, or the Trans Am on the ground here. But this guy goes in here like this, and I may have to, there we go. And so you get 3 clamping areas. You get one here, and then one on the back, but then you screw this up against to put pressure on it. So I'll show you guys kind of how it works a little later on here in the video. Once we get the brakes finished, we'll put the brakes on and then get this thing setting with the weight on the actual ground, and then we'll come back and put this in, and I'll show you kind of how to adjust it. So now onto the brakes, and what I would consider probably the least amount of fun. What I've done here, you can see I've already started cleaning on this guy, and I've got, you know, part of the front of it clean, but we need to give it a good cleanup. Obviously we need to take out, you can see I've got it setting here, but I'm gonna use my C-clamp and an old brake pad there to compress this and get all the fluid out. And then I've got a couple caps here just to put in there while we're painting and while we're cleaning, just to make sure that we don't get anything in there. Also, I'm gonna clean up my hardware. It seems like the new hardware for these doesn't always fit. So I'm gonna clean them a little bit, kind of set them aside. If I end up using them, I'll probably clean them more, but either way, we've got a lot of scrubbing to do. So probably what I will do is time lapse this. I'm gonna go ahead and probably compress this, and it doesn't matter which way you go here, guys. So we can go ahead and get all the crap out of this. Because we're obviously going to be using new pads, and they're going to require us to push these pistons back, so we might as well do it while we got them off the car. That way we're not trying to scratch the paint that I'm going to be using. There it goes. And then for the back, because obviously this paint that I'm using, we can only mix once. It's got a hardener in it, so it's only good for a set amount of time. I actually have the stock brakes, which are actually the same, but I have the stock ones off the red car. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna clean the back ones up, even though we don't have the back assembled. I'm gonna clean them all at one time. That way we can paint them all at one time. And then all we'll have to do is swap out the back when we get to that video. So that's the plan anyway. So, like I said, I'll probably time lapse the majority of this cleaning, but you guys get the idea. What I'm using here is a wire brush just to scuff them up, and some brake clean. So you don't have to get super crazy, I guess. I mean, look, I went over this for probably about, I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 minutes. Now, I've seen guys like polish these, and kudos to those guys, because the amount of work it would take to polish a set of these is just crazy in my opinion. Now, you know, they probably got better equipment than me with my steel brush out here, but this works really good. And what I wanted to do was just kind of scuff up and get some of the staining off. But at this point, I also, those original pieces I was going to use in here didn't work. But I'm going to clean it off really good. Probably going to scrub it with a toothbrush and some super clean, and then I'll go over it again with the some more brake clean. And then this one we're going to set aside. Obviously we have to do this is just the caliper. I'm going to do the bracket. I'm probably not going to show you guys any more of it. I'll just show you once I get it all finished, and you can take a look at it before I paint them. Well, after a couple hours of cleaning, I've got them all hung up here. They're all scrubbed down and ready for a coat of paint. So I'm going to go grab the paint, and we're gonna get started seeing if we can get these things coated and looking way better. So just like we used in the past, I'm gonna be using some G2 caliper paint. Guys, this stuff works really well. I just used it on my son's car, used it on a couple other projects. I used it on the green truck. I actually had the paint mix to match the truck. You can get color matches directly from them, but I'm just using red here. I think it looks nice on white cars. I don't wanna go with white because it's too hard to keep clean, but either way, we need to mix this up. You pour this guy in here and stir it up, and you let it set for about 5 minutes, and then you start painting with this little brush. Now, it is going to take me some time, and I will time lapse some of it, but I probably won't be able to time lapse all of it. You only have, I think, 4 to 6 hours of work time, and it's probably gonna take me a couple hours to get these things coated. My plan is to pull one off, kind of set it in my lap here in my chair, paint the back side of it, and then hook it back up and try to paint the front side, and then go all the way through each one of them. Once I'm finished, start over and put a second coat on. Obviously at that point I won't be able to hold it, but I'm hoping I get some pretty good coverage. So other than that, guys, I am probably going to, I think I can do a good enough job and not have to cover the little rubber boots here, because I'm not planning on painting really around that. I may end up taking those off, I don't know. If I do, I may tape them off. I'm not really sure yet, but either way, we're gonna get started. I'm gonna mix this paint up. Like I said, you gotta let it set for 5 minutes after you stir it, and then we'll start painting. As you can see, I've got one coat on everything. Probably took me an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours to get everything coated. Now, the downside is I can't hold it when I'm going along with the second coat. And I'm not gonna show you guys any of the second coat, but I am going to put a second coat on. Especially, you know, I'm not gonna concern myself with, like, you know, the back side of the brackets, or even probably, unless there's a bunch of spots I missed on the back side of like the caliper, because I'm gonna have to kind of turn it and just work my way through it. The other thing is I'm hoping that when I get back to this one, you're supposed to apply thin coats. It's kind of hard. I will tell you guys, this is amazing at self-leveling. You don't get any brush strokes really. It's really a great product. I'm telling you guys. But I also didn't paint on the inside because, look guys, that's gonna wear out, and so in my opinion there's no sense in it. I also didn't paint on the aluminum back here because it doesn't want to stick really well. So other than that, I'm gonna put a second coat on and I'll basically show you guys when I'm all finished up. This is after 2 coats and it looks really good, guys. It really does. You know, the only thing that I would change is if I'm using this stuff, I think the next time they make a little aerosol container, and it works on different kinds of paint. It's not just made by this company, but I'll list it in the description down below because I really think that it would be nice to spray them. I think it'd be quicker. I think the coverage would be a little nicer, but you know, the brush method is nice when you're not wanting to make a mess. You know, I wanted to paint it in the shop here and not get, you know, overspray on everything. But if I were doing it outside and it were a little warmer, I probably would have opted for that option because, like I said, I think the coverage would be better, and you could probably knock these out really quick if you were spraying them. But either way, we're gonna let them dry overnight, actually probably for a couple days, and then we will hopefully by that point have the new brake lines in, and we can get the front together. I did get one of my tie rods in. I have no idea why I didn't get both, but I got one of them in. So we'll at least get the one on the other side that had, I generally replace both. Even though this one feels good, the one on the other side is the one that's bad. So if I don't get it, I may just go ahead and assemble this for you guys, get it on the ground so we can get that brake piece in that I was showing you that stabilizes the master, and hopefully get this thing going back together. It's been, I guess, about 3 days now since I actually painted these guys. And in the meantime, some other stuff showed up, which are the brake rotors. You can see in that box right there on top of my wheel. Also got the brake lines, also got the tie rods. So let's get busy. I think we're gonna put the tie rods on first, then we'll go ahead and get that torqued down, and then we'll get the brake in place with the new brake line. I'm pretty excited about that. And then hopefully get it set down in the ground. I don't know whether I'm gonna put jack stands under it or put the wheels back on it, because I'm not ready to bleed the brake yet, because obviously we gotta do the back. But I don't know, we'll just have to figure that out when we get there. But at this point, let's go grab the tie rod ends and see if we can get those in place. So for the tie rod end, guys, this one isn't really bad. The only reason I'm replacing this one is because the other one was bad. And I wanna show you what I'm talking about when I say bad. So obviously if you have any up and down movement, but this one, while it's stiff, it's real jerky. So it gets to a point where it moves really quick and then it gets jerky. And so it's got some bind in it, like it's messed up. And so I went ahead and took this one off the other side and replaced it. But here's how I like to do this. We want to keep the alignment as close as possible to, you know, what we basically drove in with. We're gonna have to get it aligned because we drop it. But I'm gonna snap these on, probably a little tighter than that. And then I'm gonna loosen up the jam nut back here. And I'm just using adjustable end wrench to loosen this up, and I'll probably go the wrong way. But I'm going the wrong way. I don't think it's ever been moved. Holy cow, I may have to move the camera out of the way to get a little more leverage. But we need to loosen this jam nut up. I'm just gonna loosen it. And we wanna keep it where it's at. I'm not gonna use the new jam nut, and I'll talk about why here in just a second. Let me get this loose. So I finally got it loose. Like I said, I just loosened it. So now you can do a couple things. We can count the spins. So being 1, 2, 3, and so on. But because I'm leaving this jam nut, really guys, all I need to do is run it right up against that jam nut. So I'm not gonna worry about counting it like I normally would. I'm just gonna run it to that jam nut. Now look, if you take the jam nut off, then yeah, by all means go ahead and count how many times you go around and try to equal that out. You can also, that's another reason why I kind of didn't clean there, as you can see like the dirt line of where the old one was. But I'm gonna go grab the new one. We do need to screw the grease fitting in. Be careful, try not to cross thread it. They're kind of a pain to put in, but I'm gonna screw the new one in and bring it over here, and we'll put it on. Now we got our new one assembled. It should come with a new nut, castle nut for the top, as well as a cotter pin. So we're gonna thread this guy on. We don't want this outer tie, or the inner tie rod end to spin, so make sure it's not spinning as you're trying to thread it on. You may need to clean up your threads. Generally you don't have to, but. So once we get it to the point where it hits that jam nut, see? That's where I want to be. Now I'm gonna go ahead and put this thing up in here. We'll get the castle nut on it, and we will torque it to 42 foot-pounds is what it needs to go to. Once you get that torque down to 42, go ahead and put your cotter key or your keeper pin back in, and then I'm going to put this back on, and I'm going to snug that jam nut back up. Same situation here, guys. Make sure that your inner isn't spinning, your inner tie rod in, because it is going to want to spin when you really start to tighten this up. Just make sure that it doesn't spin completely around. That should be good. I'm gonna go one more on it. And I'll list this tie rod in down in the description. I always think it's a good idea to check any suspension parts. It's nice that the ball joints were good because they are a real pain to replace. The other thing, I'm a little picky. I want to make sure, and this one didn't move, the other side did, but if it like rolled back on you, get it kind of centered back up. It's not a huge deal, but I do like to spin. I like to spin it and get it straight up and down. So on to the brakes. We're gonna start assembling the brakes now. I'm gonna pull you guys back out because there's a couple things that I want to address before we go together. But I am gonna go grab the rotor, and they should be side specific. They will be labeled, and I'll show you guys that here in a second. But we'll put the rotor on. But we did get new hardware, and it does seem to fit, which is good. So we'll grab that, and I'll show you what we're gonna do next. As you can see, you have front, driver side. They are side specific because the slots and the cross drilled part do go a different way. That's why they're side specific. They should go this direction, which, like I said, there's a label, so shouldn't be too hard. But we do want to replace a couple things. Obviously, we want to put the new hardware in, the brake caliper brackets, but I want to put these in as well. These are the little rubber boots that go around the guide pins, and I want to pull the guide pins out and put a little bit of grease on them, making sure that they're, you know, they slide really easy. So this is what I was talking about. If you pull these completely out, obviously I got some paint on them, but let's pull these guys off, put our new ones on. And if these have rust on them or are dry, mine are in pretty good shape, you would want to clean those up with like a wire brush. The other thing, guys, is have some towels handy, because obviously we just painted these and we don't want them to be all ratty. You can see the junk on my fingers, but let's grab some caliper grease here, and we're just going to put a little more on here, making sure that it's, like I said, it slides easy. And then we'll push this in. We need to do both sides. I won't show you guys obviously both sides, but it's the same way. You need to push it on, and then we need to get it over that lip so it keeps the water out. And then I'm going to wipe off, obviously, because we don't want it dirty. So I'm going to do the other side, and then we'll grab the new hardware and put in. So now we're on to the new hardware. This bracket will go on the caliper itself, but these two guys, holy cow, they're stuck together. This is what people complain about if you look at the reviews on these brakes, that the hardware doesn't fit, but I tested it a while ago and it fits great. Another thing I'm going to do that I don't normally do is I'm going to go ahead and put the pads in while we've got it out. So you should have two separate ones. You've got one that has nothing on it, and then you have one with the wear indicator. The wear indicator on these cars goes on the inside, so the side where we're going to bolt it to the actual spindle or knuckle. But before we do that, I do want to put a little bit of caliper grease where they're going to slide. And I normally don't do it like this. I normally put it in the car and then put the brakes in it. But we're going to do a little different this time. So we're going to slide these in place. You may have to push around on them a little bit to get them started. And try not to get any grease on the actual pad itself. If you do, you can try to wipe it off, but be careful. And same thing here. And then what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to loosely thread it in place on the spindle. Once you get it in place like this, you can see I've got the caliper in place, or the bracket in place. I use the factory 18s, just thread those in the back. We do need to go ahead and torque those to 74 foot-pounds. It also, guys, would not hurt to put just a little bit of Loctite on that, maybe some blue Loctite. Now that we've got that torqued onto putting this little keeper in, it snaps in the center here, and the pins go down. You may have to bend them a little bit. It's a pretty snug fit. There we go. It goes in like that. And of course I'm trying to keep the brake fluid from getting on the brand new paint, so I had these plugs in here. But here's another thing. I always take your suggestions, guys. So somebody suggested to me, instead of like putting this on the pad, why don't you just put it on the caliper and it makes less of a mess. And so I'm gonna take his word for it. I think he's right. I think it's a better option. We can just go ahead and put it on the pistons, like the spots that are gonna be touching. This is just caliper grease. And you should get some with your pads, but it's not enough, especially if you do it right and like grease those guide pins like we did. And so I'm going to put the factory 12s back in here, go ahead and get this guy lined up, and then the fun part, because the brake line is like my least favorite thing to do, I will tell you that, guys. This is why we opened up those calipers as well. Remember, we opened them up so we would go on nice and smooth and not have to take our freshly painted calipers and press the pistons back in. Now you need to torque these bolts, these guide bolts, to 37 foot-pounds. You're probably also going to have to hold, I use a 17 right here, actually a 16 here on this inner piece to keep it from spinning while we get them torqued down. I don't even know why I'm doing this right now. I'm such a clean freak. Here's where it's going to get a little messy. So I'm going to go ahead and put a towel under this. It's not really going to make a huge difference, but it'll keep some of the junk that's going to fall out kind of contained. And where you're going to really need, this is where you're going to really need some line wrenches, guys. I like to put a little bit of WD-40 on this line. And that's way more than a little bit. And then we need to use, I'm using, I believe, a 12 millimeter. Yeah, it's a 12. And we need to pop this line loose. And so you got to kind of think backwards, because you're obviously loosening from the opposite direction. So it should be going down, should be loosening, but it's kind of a trial and error thing. If it doesn't feel like it's going anywhere, don't force it. That actually cracked loose pretty easy. So I want to get this loose before I even think about, and when I say loose, I mean pretty almost out. And then we can worry about getting this little pin out of the way. And I like to do that with a flat blade screwdriver. I like to get it to where I can spin it with my fingers. We're to that point now. So then I'm going to put a flat blade screwdriver in here. I'm going to kind of pry up against that brake line. The other thing you can do is you can use a hammer and kind of tap on the end here and tap this thing out of the way. But a lot of times, I don't know whether I'll be able to do it with the camera where it is, but we need to drive this guy off in order to relieve pressure on the line. Once you get that clip out, that's what it looks like. We can set it aside. I'm gonna clean it up just a little bit, but then I can go ahead and thread this the rest of the way out, and it's gonna be messy. And we can hopefully, this thing's pretty snug. I may have to pop it with a hammer here. Been on there since 98, actually probably 97. Get this old brake line out of the way. See, it's dripping. We're gonna see if we can clean it a little bit here. I'm gonna put this towel under it so it can have something to drip on besides my freshly painted stuff. And then we need to grab our new brake line. I'm gonna put the 2 washers on and our bolt in the middle because it technically needs to go onto the caliper like this. So this right angle. And then the other thing I didn't tell you guys is if you're doing these and you have no idea which caliper goes on which side, the bleeder should always be on the top. So that's a good way to tell the difference. But we're gonna go grab the crush washers, the bolt. So we'll put a crush washer on the bottom, one on the top, and the bolt through the middle. And I'm gonna go ahead and loosely set this, get this in place on here. And then we're gonna get it up in here and start threading this in before we put that pin back in. I wanna get it nice and evenly threaded. Don't cross thread this, guys. That is a nightmare if you strip that. You're gonna have to pull off some major stuff to get to that brake line. There was no real good way to show you guys me hooking this up. So it is all hooked up now. You do have to hold the outer with an 18, so this on the outside, and then get that snug. Same thing here on the back of the caliper. Like I said, you can see the way it's shaped, the way it's going. You want to get it tightened up, clean up your mess, put your pin back in. Remember this little clip that holds the line in place? I did that before I started to tighten it. And I cleaned up really well underneath, and we're just gonna check for any leaks in the, probably in the morning. That is not a leak, by the way. That's where it was dripping, and I cleaned it up with brake clean. It is not a fresh leak. So I've got it supported with the weight on the lower A-arms. I'm not in love with the way it's setting right now. I may end up lifting it back up and just putting the wheels on, but as a matter of fact, I think I'm going to. I just don't love this. We'll just put a couple bolts in the wheels. We're gonna have to take it back off to bleed it anyway, but I wanna get the weight on it so we can tighten up everything up top and put that new brake master brace in place. One other thing I forgot to mention here, guys, while I had that jack underneath the A-arm, I did go ahead and tighten up the sway bar end link. You wanna tighten it up until the bushing just starts to get even with those washers. And so that's what we've got. And the center should not spin. That piece of copper in the center should not be spinning. So got that accomplished on both sides. So now I can put the wheel on, we can go up top and finish up what we need to do up here. Now that we got it setting on the ground, it doesn't look a lot lower yet because we haven't, you know, leveled out the suspension. So we'll get to that eventually. But we need to torque these down. So the T50s and the 15s, I believe, or 13s, these back ones, they go to 37. The nut on the front goes to 32. But I did switch. So you remember that T50 that we had to take this apart? If you move one of the T50s, the outer one here, over to the other side, for one, it makes it look more symmetrical, and two, you have the ability to get to that without having to take our master loose like we did before. So that's why I did what I did. So I'm gonna go ahead and torque this back one right here. I'm gonna pull this out, torque that down to 37, torque the two down over there to 37, and then we'll grab our bracket because it has to go under these three, that T50 back there and these two nuts. Got that 13 actually tightened up. And I need to take this nut off, and one back here off. You have to move your brake lines over a bit, it looks like. Get it out of the way. Then we need to take that T50 out, and I guess, oh, that's coming out. And then like I had said earlier, guys, if you don't have a strut brace, it does come with a spacer to make that work. But we need to go ahead, thread this guy in, and thread it in quite a ways, at least halfway. And then we need to get this in here, obviously over the stud. The brake lines are definitely playing a role here. So once we get it in there, we can go ahead and put our T50 back, and we can torque it to 37. And then we could put this nut back on, and we can torque all these. I want to kind of center this, which will be hard to see on this side, but I can tell by the other side. Kind of get this centered, and we'll torque these front ones to 37, and then we'll come back and talk about how we're going to adjust this guy here. Man, I tell you guys, these, this one's not bad, but this one back here is tight. It's tough to get to. Also, I kind of bent my brake lines back a little ways because they were rubbing on it, and I didn't want them to rub a hole in it. I think we're good now, but anyway, I'm taking a 16 millimeter, and we're gonna run this thing up. Probably didn't have to take it quite as far out as I did, but we're gonna run it up until it touches the end of the master here. And you don't want to get real crazy. You can put some pressure on it, but don't put a ton of pressure on it. Obviously you don't want to bend it back the other way, but you also at the same time don't want it moving. So we're gonna run it down, get it up against there, and then I'll try to show you guys. There is a jam nut that goes on the back here, and we'll get it in place, and that should be it. I noticed that it didn't line up completely square with this. And there's no real way to move it, but it is snug now. It is sturdy. Like I said, I didn't get crazy tightening it up, but there is a washer here. I don't even necessarily know that you need the washer, but then we have a jam nut to run up against that to make sure it doesn't back off, which it would be pretty tough for it to back off, but it is a nice little added feature to get that. So we'll snug it up against that. And yeah, it's a well-made piece. I just wonder, you know, if maybe after a while your firewall bends, and that may be why it sets the way it does, because my master is all the way back where it needs to be. So I don't know. Maybe it's just, I mean, it's still giving it pressure. It's just, I kind of wanted it centered, you know. So there we have it, guys. I think I am effectively finished in this video. We got a lot accomplished, and took a lot of time, but we got the front finished, right? So my plan is to do the back of the next video. I'm gonna show you guys a few things in a minute, but we got the new strut bar in place. Obviously, we've got that brake piece, that brake bracket or brake brace, whatever you wanna call it, put in. Like I said, pretty nice piece. I'll list all this stuff in the description down below. Obviously, we got the new brakes. We got the calipers painted, those rotors. It just looks really, really nice. I didn't even show you guys the inner fenders. You guys will see more of that when we go to bleed the brakes in the next video. But yeah, I'm gonna, like I said, I figured I'd cut this up in a couple different videos. We do the front in this video. We got the back to do. I am gonna show you guys a few pieces that I've got. Got a huge mess to clean up in here. I got crap scattered everywhere, but I got the rear brake lines, got the rear brakes, and then as you can see, we are going to do some suspension modifications. So some lower control arms, some lower control arm relocation brackets, an adjustable panhard rod. So we do have several things to put on the back of this thing, as well as lowering the back. I am not going to be changing the spring, or I'm sorry, the shocks in the back. I do not believe, unless they're leaking for some reason. But guys, it's coming together. Let me know in the comments if you're liking this progress. I know I need to get on the red one. It's honestly kind of inspiring me a little bit to get this thing out of the way, get it drivable, and get on the red one. So if you are enjoying this, like always, guys, please smash that thumbs up button. If you guys are not subscribed, please go down there, hit that subscribe button. Of course, ring the bell icon that notifies you every single time we drop a new video, and stay tuned to see what we work on next.